Phyllis Trible was a biblical scholar who sought to bring feminist ways of seeing the world to biblical study, an area which had traditionally been dominated by male perspectives. There are three key elements to her work. I'm going to discuss them in turn and also how they interact with each other within her work and give structure and meaning to her work. So they are rhetorical criticism, feminist hermeneutics, and a Christian theological commitment. Now, there are two traditional aspects of biblical criticism that have existed for a rather long time. One is historical critical, which tries to discern the historical context of the people writing or influencing the text. Basically, who were the people who wrote these words and what did they think and how did they think? Another is form criticism, which is focused on the forms of the Bible and what each of those meant. So looking at poems, parables, prophecy, the apocalyptic, gospel, looking at the Bible through the lens of the kinds of literary forms these texts actually take and what that means for what people are going to be able to discern from these texts and what they mean. Phyllis Trible focused on a third one, though, which she called rhetorical criticism, which is closely reading the Bible as a literary work. Similar to form criticism, but it's not just breaking up the Bible according to specific forms and analyzing it in that regard, but instead looking at the Bible in total as an actual piece of literature, similar to the way that one would examine the works of Shakespeare or something along those lines. This is a complement to, and it's a movement beyond form criticism. Trible said that the main clue to interpretation is the text itself. Thus, I view the text as a literary creation with an interlocking structure of words and motifs. The proper analysis of form yields a proper articulation of meaning. So she's taking form criticism seriously, looking at a poem as a poem, but she's also looking at the poem in terms of how it fits in the larger structure of whatever book of the Bible that poem is a part of, or even the section of that Bible, of the Bible that one poem is coming from, and what that means in terms of the whole thrust of the theme of that specific book or that specific section of the Bible. So the key to rhetorical criticism isn't applying tools to the text, but discerning what meaning is coming from the text. There's a close focus on what was unique for the text, seeing uniqueness as a marker for something a text is trying to emphasize or highlight. So if it's different, if something from that specific text is different from other texts, then maybe the text itself is trying to tell you something, saying this unique thing is actually important. She traced metaphors across different texts, viewing them as similar, binding texts together as one tradition. Now, this is fully in line with both Jewish and Christian tradition, this idea of looking at metaphors as they move across biblical time. This is particularly, especially when you're looking at metaphors for who God is or who Jesus is throughout the text. You can see similarities as you look at the use of the metaphor of God as Father in one section and what that might mean if it's connected to another section and another section and another section. Again, this is fully in line with what the tradition has already established as vital and important ways of interpreting the text. This forces the reader to contemplate the terror sometimes implicit in the text itself and our own complicity in it as inheritors of the biblical tradition. So Trible took the Bible seriously as a text that spoke to the concerns and perspectives of the people who composed it, including their conviction that their experience of the divine was real and inspired the ways that they told their own story. Part of this is a close reading of the text, seeing what is included there that does speak to the experiences of women. So, for example, the four women that she refers to in her book, The Texts of Terror, and that would be Hagar, which is included in the chapters Genesis 16 to 21. Tamar, which is in 2 Samuel 13. Jephthah's daughter, who's never actually given a name, she's just known as Jephthah's daughter, is in Judges 11. And an unnamed woman who literally doesn't even have any connection to anyone else in Judges 19 through 21. Trible makes the argument that these are actually prominent figures in the story and offer us plenty of access to the ways that women lived and experienced the divine. So it's taking the women's stories seriously and not just seeing them as addenda or extras added on to the main story of the patriarchs. The text itself, by focusing so much attention to the story of these women, is also making the argument, Trible stated and claimed, that the text wants us to pay attention to these women and see what these women experience and how they speak about their experience and how the community who composed these texts, how they understood the experience of women in these times. Trible called this method depatriarchalizing in biblical interpretation. So basically trying to take the patriarchy and the way that we've, sort of placed the patriarchal understandings, interpretations of the Bible as main or traditional or most serious or things that we see as truth. She's seeing by looking at the text itself and looking at areas that have been ignored, she's sort of pulling back that sort of patriarchal framework through which we've had to view the text and said instead, let's look at what the text itself is saying, removing some of these other lenses. Now, she acknowledges that considerable evidence indicts the Bible as a document of male supremacy, as she states, but she also insists that that's not the end. Instead, we cannot dismiss the Bible so easily or stop striving to find ways of reading the text. As she states, the hermeneutical challenge is to translate biblical faith without sexism. So, in a sense, Trible is arguing here that you can read the Bible itself and just how the Bible is written, what the Bible is trying to say to the world, without having to read it through specifically traditional sexist lenses. There are ways of reading the texts themselves that aren't bound to traditional visions of patriarchy. That the text itself might have some patriarchy woven into it, but it's not inherent. That it can be liberatory for women and can speak to the experience of more people than just specific sets of men. Now, she argues depatriarchalizing is not an operation which the exegete, or someone who's interpreting the Bible, performs on the text. It is an hermeneutic, or a viewpoint, a perspective, which is already operating within the scripture itself. We expose it, we do not impose it. Now, Trible lists numerous themes already present within the text itself, which disavow sexism. In a sense, Trible is trying to remind us that the Bible isn't a simple story, but is instead a complex and rich tapestry of various ideas, worldviews, and experiences. Finally, Trible is reading the text as a Christian, as a believer in the truth of the text. Many who also emphasize these same themes of depatriarchalizing, themes of emphasizing a way of viewing the text that is not traditional and not bound by patriarchal sexist themes, are also believers, people who inherently believe that what this story says is actual truth and it's valuable. So these people aren't trying to destroy Christianity or, Judaism or, any of the traditional beliefs. They're trying to say they are people from these traditions and that they are engaging in this work because they are members of these traditions and they take that seriously. That in some ways is really what the import is and the most important aspect is of Trible reading this as somebody who is herself a Christian, this Christian theological commitment. is that she's seeking to take the Bible seriously and treat it as such, something which should be taken seriously and which should be read as a valuable document. So in a way, she's trying to, in some sense, peel away what she sees in the text, the value that she sees.